So, how do I reason to come to this kind of conclusion? And that was something that Professor Kumar kindly referred to, future studies. I'll just share with you two words, holism and dialectics. You try to understand many, many variables at the same time. There's nothing mystical, esoteric in the word holism. It only means many-dimensional analysis. And you have to keep a number of intellectual walls in the head at the same time. Then comes dialectics. You ask yourself, where are the major contradictions cutting through all this? The major contradiction, the major actio reactio, the major position opposition. Whether I said I mentioned civil political rights, economic social rights, empire versus satellite, older versus younger, men versus women. They're all important. 18 December, I was giving a talk for professors at the University of Cairo, in Cairo. They had examined my credentials at the University of Cairo and found that I was not the person to be invited. So it had to happen outside, at a very nice cultural center. And at that one I said, I would not be surprised if relatively soon there is a massive revolt in Egypt against this horrible poverty. And they said, no, that cannot happen. There are military police and secret police all over the place. And I said, I would not be surprised if they will side with those who make the revolt. I'm a little bit proud of it, so I don't share my intellectual vanity with the group. A little bit proud of it. How did I come to that? Holism and dialectics. Where did the 1.5 billion annual Camp David bribe money end? Not with rank and file policemen, but with the top military brass. They will then do their best to keep the system, as they have tried. And indeed, the first thing they said was that Camp David remains, stays intact, because that's the basis for a 1.5 billion. But the ordinary Egyptian conscript is not in that. Holism, dialectics. Let me now take variable number 4 and write on it for a second. Youth revolt. And I ask the question, when will it come to Israel? And let me take the woman revolt and I ask the question, when will it come to Israel? Now, this is a new question. I do not expect Israel to revolt against its particular shape of democracy, which I call generalocracy, because the only choice is between generals, one general or the other, at least in recent years. Nor will I argue against inequality in the income distribution. Israel is certainly not among the worst countries. Nor will I argue that I think Israel will revolt against its own imperial construction. Rather to the contrary, it will try to maintain it. The opposition, the peace movement, the peace now, was Ashkenazi to a large extent. And we will find very many of them in California, where they escaped. The country is very Sephardic, very Russian. Of the 1 million Russians imported, 300,000 were not Jewish. But they were imported for a particular job, to be settlers on the West Bank, and rewarded with it. So where would I expect this to land in Israel? And I'm now making some little prediction. And I don't expect it to come true within the first 3-4 years, but maybe within 5 years. Man, woman, old, young. I I think the weak point in the Israeli construction is the one that will find its revolt expression in young women. Why do I say that? Well, the Judaism in Israel is one of the orthodox Judaic varieties. It is not conservative, not reformed. In that particular type of Judaism, women are suppressed. You will of course understand that the covenant that Abraham was invited into with Yahweh is a covenant with men. The circumcision is for men. And I think in circumcision for women, it is in a sense a threat to the Jewish covenant. Just mention it to throw in a totally different perspective on that. I'm in no way, in any way favoring it, not at all. I'm just saying that we are treading here on sacred ground. Now, this covenant in Orthodox Judaism, I don't know how many times I have been, at least 100 times, to the Middle East, since I started as a mediator in 1964. And in 1971 presented a peace plan, which is a Middle East community of Israel with the 5 neighboring Arab countries, Israel back to 67, open borders, free flow, not settlement investment to start with, that will come later. Model European community. I stand by that. But the point is that whenever I gave a seminar, a workshop, a lecture, up to me, at least 100 times, came Israeli women saying, very interesting, but you didn't touch the major problem of this country. Man-woman. The major problem. At the same time as we, Jewish women, are the ones who carry the Jewish nation. Because the criterion of being Jewish is not what you believe, but being born by a Jewish mother. In other words, our reproductive machinery apparatus is absolutely crucial to the whole idea of Judaism, at the same time as we are suppressed. This is not tenable. It is not sustainable. Well, am I now anti-Semitic? Not the slightest. Absolutely not. First of all, anti-Semitic would mean being against both Jews and Arabs, and neither one nor the other. But I'm a pretty good social scientist. So I'm just sort of trying to focus on the contradiction I see. Let us see. I don't think any country in North Africa, Middle East, is untouched by what now happens. When will this come to the United States of America? I'm wondering. I was not able to predict that it would come to Madison, Wisconsin. I was not. And yet it landed in Madison, Wisconsin, by a non-violent revolt by Democratic senators. We can then have a long discussion back and forth. This is not according to the textbook what to do in a democracy. But it was non-violence in order not to participate in a decision-making by being present of something which was against the rather basic human freedom in the economic and social rights, not in the civil political. And the 1966 Covenant of Economic and Social Rights is not ratified by the US. The civil political covenant, yes, but not the economic social. Which is one reason why you find so little about it on CNN, ABC, NBC, and so mainstream media. So, it was something. I expected to land many places. But the kind of breeze of having a second look when inequality accumulates and when power concentrates in too few hands and when youth are discriminated against and women are discriminated against will come all over the world, including China. The Jasmine Revolution. Now, all of these are complex phenomena. It should not be reduced to Mohammed Bouazizi in Tunisia, setting himself on fire on 17 December last year, and then bringing about a linear chain of causality, starting with Tunisia, then going to Egypt, then going on so on and so on. And you can get it by the dates. Washington Post had a long exercise in linear causality. There are many things at work. Let me now just come to an end with this by saying something about 2 or 3 particular problems. Let us start with Libya. NATO countries, spearheaded by the USA, are now at war in Libya, siding with one party in a civil war. Why don't I call it a no-fly zone to protect the civilian population? I don't. This is not the US fault. It's the United Nations. If the United Nations had the same ability to protect any civilian population exposed to bombing, whether they live in Gaza or they're exposed to Qassam rockets from Gaza, or they live in Bahrain, wherever they live, then I would say this is a humanitarian action. But if the humanitarian action is exercised by certain countries only against their foes to protect their friends, I will not use that word. I would simply talk about war. If a physician comes to the rescue only of his friends and not of his foes in a battle, he's no longer a physician. He's a traitor to the Hippocratic Oath. He is simply a part of the war machine, who instead of killing the enemy is healing the friends. From the point of view of the balance of the battlefield, it comes to the same. So we have a clear case of participating on behalf of one side. My prediction was that it will probably last 20 years. I think that Libya has much more tenacity against Western powers than Iraq had. Why do I say that? Libya is some kind of a country. Iraq never was. It's a construction by the British Foreign Office in 1916. The Ottoman Empire had collapsed, and 2 civil servants came, and their task was to construct out of the remnants of the Ottoman Empire something that had Kirkuk, Mosul oil in the north and Basra oil in the south. The rest is a question of just collecting 18 provinces, and you baptize those 18 provinces Iraq, which they were never called before. Mesopotamia, yes, but not that construction. Inside that construction you have 61% Shia, 16% Sunni, and the rest Kurdish and some others. It's an impossible country. It could only be kept together either under a monarch supported by the British or by the communist, more or less, dictatorship of Qassam, or the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, or by the coalition headed by the US occupation. Take any one of those away, it'll come to pieces immediately. Those pieces could be a confederation, but probably not even a federation. None of this is the case for Libya. Libya has more coherence. Now, having said that, I would expect the resistance to go on. And I may be wrong. If they managed to kill Gaddafi last time in '86, they only killed his daughter. If they managed to kill Gaddafi, it will probably last longer. To construct a martyr out of Gaddafi will probably not serve their interests. They may end up with a divided country, and they will be interested where the oil fields are, and go for DFI, direct foreign investment. So that's a prediction. I think Yemen is practically speaking gone, in the sense that they have now the difficult uphill fight after they sacrifice Saleh to go into default position number 2 and 3 and see what can be done at that point. Now that struggle is against them. The empires. Will there be any basic change in Syria? I think the Syrian leadership understands that they better yield on a number of fronts, and they seem to be doing it. And that leads me to a basic question: the Muslim Brotherhood and Islam. What I have said now is that there are Arab countries and Arab countries. They are obviously different. And they have given 5 dimensions of Islam. I have been living with it for a very long time. I'm often invited to Muslim World Conferences. And one of my boasts is that once when I asked, why do you invite me, they said, well, we invite you because you are one of the very few Westerners who can talk 5 minutes about Islam without making one single mistake. What you say is utter trivialities, completely banal, nothing interesting, but there's no mistake and we are not used to that. So I then asked what happens in minute number 6, and they said, you're intelligent enough to shut up. Because by that time you have exhausted your knowledge anyhow. No, this is more or less correct. I've done some little work, some little study to come to that point. And let me now give you Islam and Islam. The Muslim Brotherhood, as far as I understand it, is not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is not an organization, but a movement. It's an anti-imperial movement, but that is not their rhetoric. If you read Osama bin Laden, then you will find that his rhetoric is pro-Islam, it's against secularization. And he sees the empires as instruments of secularization that put Islam in the shadows. So what kind of Islam do we have? I think the Egyptian one is extremely moralistic. It's against the moral depravity that they see as the consequence of secularization of Egypt. Which started in the early 19th century with Muhammad Ali, the modernizer of Egypt, from Albania, of all places, inside the Ottoman Empire. Qutb studied at California Institute of Technology. He was shocked by what he saw in California, particularly of sexual behavior. And what happened then, that he was there the same year as Alfred Kinsey's reports on American males and later on American females came out. As far as I've been told, he bought 5 copies of each book and traveled back to Cairo with documentation. I think he learned quite a lot about sexuality too, incidentally. But leaving that aside, he couldn't get a better documentation. If you look at the photos of people in the Muslim Brotherhood, you see a collection of older Muslim gentlemen, deeply concerned about the depravity of the youth. I'm not saying that's everything there is to it, but I find the concern in the Muslim Brotherhood wasted. Turkish Islam has a totally different concept. Erdogan, the Prime Minister, Gül, the President, Davutoglu, the Foreign Minister. What they want to prove to the world is that Islam is compatible with democracy and parliamentarism. At the opening of the parliament, there has to be a lot of Allah the Merciful. But you no doubt noticed that Obama ended his speech yesterday with God bless America. I don't know how deep that is in Obama, but at least he feels this is the sentence that has to be said. Turkey is practicing the same. Iran is totally different. It's a question of the right faith, the right words. Shia versus Sunni. If you pronounce the right words are on the right side, the wrong words are on the wrong side. It's very similar to Protestantism, to evangelical Christianity in the US. It is John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. And that is why the US is so concerned about Hugo Chavez, because all his words are wrong. And they're so happy about demonstrators who never talk about empire. They don't like that word. Shia is somewhat similar. And that's why Iran and the United States understand each other so well, in the sense of being at loggerheads. It's a totally unnecessary debate which somebody should mediate. It's a dangerous one. But I see it essentially as two theological positions on the two sides. And these two positions should be unraveled and understood for what they are. I could then go country by country further and say there are differences and there are similarities. But the basic point is this. From the advent of the Western Empire after the end of the Ottoman Empire, Islam has been in the shadows. What everyone can say about the Ottoman Empire, it was Muslim. It was not in the shadows. As empires go, the Ottoman Empire was among the more acceptable ones. But they were the allies of Germany in the First World War. So England, France and Russia decided to use the added potential to get rid of it, and they managed. They managed in 1916 with the Sykes-Picot Treason, in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, in 1918 with the occupation of Constantinople, which they called it. It was actually Istanbul. So when Osama bin Laden uttered the word after 9/11, you are now suffering the humiliation that we suffered more than 80 years ago. The first thing I did was, of course, to take 2001 minus 80, that is 1921, but he says more than. We came to 1919, 1917, 1916. I Googled myself into US media, how many have picked up this point? Answer, 0. If you want not to understand what goes on, that's one good recipe. Eliminate history. Satanize the country, reduce the country to one citizen. Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi. And understand nothing, and you are in for surprises. So I have indicated somewhat, if you will. So, I have said now that there are Arab countries and Arab countries, there is Islam and there is Islam. There is an enormous wave of liberation in the Arab world. Our task should be to support it, to the bottom, to let them be the rulers of their own country, not to manipulate them militarily, politically, economically, or culturally. These are people who have very, very much to offer. They are 350 million in 22 countries. Behind them are 1,560 million Muslims in 57 countries. A sizable part of the world. The 5 countries that abstained in the Security Council represent almost half of humanity. When you add up Brazil, Russia, India, China, Germany. The countries that are operating the coalition in Libya represent at most 500 million. Now, I have no doubt who will win in the longer run. But in the shorter run, we will see a lot of strange things happening. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm of course available for questions, and those who would, it so happens that by chance I have some books here.
So the floor is open to questions, please.
Thank you, Professor Galtung, for being here. I'm Silson Ahjoub. I'm from Tunisia. I was very happy to hear you talk about Tunisia today. We don't hear much about it. I'd like to ask you, what do you think Tunisia's prospects are? Are we going to have a second Ben Ali? Are we going to have a second Ben Ali? Is it possible that the empirical forces put another CIA agent in there? We have a temporary government. It doesn't seem to be working much, and we don't know what's going to happen. Do you have any predictions?
Well, I take it for granted that the agent is there, but I just want to share with you the rather obvious thing that Mossad is much more clever than CIA. You see, about CIA, it is central and an agency, and not so true about the intelligence. Mossad is clever. In other words, you're up against horrible odds. And the important thing is to keep the pressure up. You might come to the conclusion that an alternative government might be the answer. Parallel government. You will put the military to the test, you will see what kind of constitution, what kind of election arrangement comes out of it. You will see how willing they are to make it fair and free, FAFE elections, with adequate control from the outside, and if they don't pass the tests, the experience is that a good idea is a parallel government. This will go on for some time. And I have indicated what the Mossad agent's basic concern will be, that Camp David will survive. I think sooner or later Camp David is up for revision. And I've indicated what I think the alternative is. It's a Middle East community. But the Middle East community means that Israel limits its ambitions to 1967 for June with some revisions, some minor revisions. The present leadership of Israel is not willing to do that. The young women that I'm hoping for might be contact young women in Egypt as quickly as possible. In Israel, I mean.
Excuse me, she was asking about Tunis. How do you bring in Israel?
I didn't get that. You see, if I start talking without microphone, I wouldn't reach you. I simply didn't get it. If maybe somebody heard it.
It's important. Student, I think she's a student. Ask about Tunisia, and you are answering about Israel. How is Israel? What is Israel to do, and what does the Camp David to do with Tunisia?
Has everything to do with it. What happened when Nasser was defeated and Sadat Mubarak became the successors was a turnaround of Egyptian politics. Now this turnaround was partly intra-Egyptian, partly engineered from the outside. The Camp David agreement is an agreement which has beauty to it, peace and ceasefire, and ugliness to it. The Palestinians don't exist. Israel, Egypt have no right to enter an agreement over the heads and backs of the Palestinians. For that reason, the agreement was stillborn from the very beginning. And the same goes for Camp David too. Well, about this, we can now go on for some time and just give you my answer to your question.